Hey, this is Reid's Reviews. Today let's go over this RC5 loop station by Boss. This is like the RC3 but better. It comes with an LCD display. It makes it a little bit easier to configure, as well as they've included some rhythm features that kind of the RC I think was lacking, and this just really makes it kind of a more full looper. Let me go into it. I'll tell you what these features are, demo it, give you my thoughts. So let's jump right in. The tempo button here is a single purpose button. It only is for the tempo. You'll notice that these two deal with rhythm. With tempo, I can push it by tapping it, and I can set a tempo by tapping it, or I can, after I push that, I can change a tempo by turning this knob. I can also get super fine-tuned if I want. You notice that little bar underneath there just moved to the 0. If I wanted to, I could get super fine-tuned. One thing that's important to note is if I push down the knob and then rotate, you'll notice it goes in increments of 10. If I do it without pushing it down, it goes in increments of 1. All right, so that's it for tempo. Let's go into this on-off, and this is part of the rhythm section. And this button, if you short press it, it'll basically push it down once. It will basically say it's ready, and it will start the rhythm when you start your loop. If you push it again, it'll just be permanently on. All right. If you long press it, it goes into the menu items for rhythm specifically. This is exactly what it says. This is the level output of the rhythm. I'm not going to go into that more. This is reverb effect. It's kind of nice that they have that on there. I'm not going to go into that more, but basically the next things are really, I think, where they've expanded this. So you've got the patterns. Previous pedals had like 10 patterns. This has a whole bunch, and not just like one in a genre or a type. You'll notice simple beats, there's 4. They go into these groove beats. There's 7. You've got rock, funk, shuffle, and so forth. So there's quite a bit. I'll just leave it there. Move to the next configuration item. This is variation, and this is variation within a particular selection. So I picked a specific rhythm pattern in the previous menu item, and now within that I can change the sound of it from variation A to B, and it's very subtle, not anything big, but it's subtle. Now, something important to realize too, and this kind of was a little frustrating for me at first when I was trying to figure out how do I switch the variations on this on the fly, and really when it comes down to it is I kind of can't without an external foot switch. So with just the pedal, I can choose to do either variation A or variation B. So you can hear it's subtly different. It sounds like B's more complex. But if I had an external foot switch, if I wanted to on the fly, I could change those variations. Without one, I just have to set it to A or B and then continue with that. Okay, so this next is, okay, when I do have an external foot switch, when is it going to flip to the variation? So when is it going to go from A to B? One is at the end of the measure. If I had an external foot switch, I would push down, and that variation wouldn't kick in till the next measure, the beginning of the next measure. Or I can say, hey, when I push down the external foot switch, the variation will kick in at the end of my loop, and then another one will come across. So if my loop happens to be 4 measures, it's not going to kick in after a measure within the loop. It will kick in at the beginning of the next loop. Now this next one is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically the drum kit. And so, you know, they've done a great job. There's some emulation going on here, and you can just really kind of fine tune the sound that you want. So I think that's kind of cool. Beat. So this is the time signature. Important to realize up front that you cannot set the time signature unless there is nothing recorded on the pedal. Also, it's important to realize that if you're playing the drums, even if something's not recorded, you can't change it. You have to stop it. I don't have anything recorded on it. You can tell that too because this light is not on. If on the memory slot that I was on, this was green, that would mean there's something recorded. But it lets me go from 2/4 all the way up to 7/4, and then 5/8 all the way up to 15/8. So this right here is what happens when you trigger the rhythm to start. When is it going to start? And the loop start is kind of what you're used to if you've used loopers before. Basically, when you start recording, it's going to do exactly that. It's going to start the rhythm. So when I hit record, it started the rhythm at that exact same time. And you'll note that I had the tempo at that time set at 53 before I started playing. And so that tempo was fixed at 53. Now, if I go back into here and I'll hold this down to go back into the memory, and then I go into the start again, and I change this to say, hey, I want the rhythm to start at the end of my recording. This is kind of interesting because basically this is going to kind of allow you to set the tempo before the rhythm kicks in, and then the rhythm will play at that given tempo. So let me show you what I mean. So I'll hold this down to erase. Okay, and if you remember, the tempo was set at 53. So within the first measure, I'm going to play fast for the first measure. So it's not going to show 53 now in the tempo, 81. So it kind of adjusted the tempo according to how I played because it didn't start the rhythm until after I had finished my recording. This one is, it took me a second to figure this one out, basically before loop. If I start recording something and I push this once, it's playing the rhythm and it's before the loop has started recording. You'll notice that you don't see any progress on this. So if I push this down again, all of a sudden, it starts recording. So now let's go into the next, which is stop. When you trigger the rhythm to stop, when will it actually do that? This is off. So basically the rhythm's never going to stop. It's going to keep on going until you push this off button. So if I start it, then I start recording something. Let's erase what I recorded there. Okay. Then I start recording something. And then I stop. The recording stopped, but the rhythm's going to keep on playing. If I were to press play, the rhythm's going to play. If I were to overdub on top of that, it's going to keep on playing. Can drive you nuts if you don't know what's going on. That's the way you would stop it in that case. This is the typical one. This is kind of what the default is set to, and it's essentially when you're recording the rhythms, and you have the rhythm playing. When you stop the loop, whether you're recording or playing, when you stop it, it is going to stop the rhythm at that same time. All right, so let me just demo this to you. Record and there. All right, so I'm pushing once. It's arming it to start the rhythm. When I push the pedal down, it'll start recording. Now I stop, and that was the end of the recording. And it took it off, even though I had it set on kind of, the ready, it just removed it. So now if I hit play, I'm not going to have any rhythm going on. This is record count. This is like a count in, and you have one option or two options, off or one measure. So if I have it set at one measure, and then I start recording something, you'll hear that clock sounding. All right, so let's go to the next item, and this is play count. And this is basically a count-in, not related to the recording, but related to when you play a loop. And again, you only have the option of a measure. So let's go ahead and play here. It's actually doing a count-in, I'm not recording. But for whatever reason, if you wanted to still hear the count-in when you were playing, you could do that. I'm going to go ahead and clear what I currently have there, pressing both of those at the same time, and then rotating this, pushing down twice. There we go. All right, let's go to the next item. Scroll all the way to the end. And we are at fill. This is something that you need to know up front in order to not kind of get frustrated. This is a drum fill. You're not going to hear it. You can't trigger, I have not been able to find a way to trigger this drum fill by the pedal itself. So just kind of keep that in mind, and so you don't get frustrated with it. Now, part one, this is allows you to kind of create the complexity of the particular rhythm pattern that you've created. Let's just listen to what we've got going on. Part one is on. It makes it more simple when it's off. And there's 4 layers of things. And again, this is going to be a little bit, this is going to be something that you can control for any of your rhythm patterns, which is kind of neat, to be honest. I like it a lot. Okay. Now, there's 2 more. There's tone low and tone high. Basically, exactly what they sound like. They're kind of EQ features. All right. And that is it for the rhythm part. Inside of setup, you have a general section. We have the display contrast of the screen, can let you adjust, you know, what it looks like, so to make it easier for you to be able to read it. And then the display mode, it will just show you what that main screen is doing, what the status of the pedal is in general. And this is pretty basic. Let me show you. You can see it says recording. That's it. That's all it's going to show you. All right. If I'm playing, we'll just say play. Or if I want to overdub, it'll say dub. The next one is position. And position is where you are on the loop. The next one is status and position. So it's going to have on the top, it will tell you the status. On the bottom, it's going to show you the position within the loop. This is the number and the position. I'm not going to show you this one because it's pretty straightforward. I think you get the point. But instead of saying the status, which was like play, it would be the memory slot number up here and then the position of the loop down here. Name and position. So you instead of having a number for a memory slot, you can actually name it. It's something that you do over here in this, and I'll show you that in a second. But it would basically, in the top part of that display, it would show the name, and then it would show you the position you are in the loop. This is the beat, and it will show you where you are in the measure. So you'll see this going across the top, and this is where you are in the loop. This will be just that beat section that you saw on the top earlier, but it would be the whole entire screen. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it on number and position. Let's move to the next item. Memory extent. What the memory extent is this can hold 99 memory slots. And if you're on 5 and you wanted to go to 4, if you had an external foot switch that was incrementing the memory slot value, you'd have to basically traverse all the way to 99 and the background to 1 to change it. But if you have the memory extent set, you can say, okay, I want the minimum range. And this is basically you're defining a range that you're going to allow these memory slots to be changed with an external foot switch. And remember that this is not going to work with the knob. Let me show you, because it's probably a little bit confusing right now, but let me just show you. So right here, I have set the max memory slots to be controlled by an external foot switch to be, the minimum was 1 and max is 3. And you'll note that if I go back to the main screen, says I'm on slot 1, if I twist this, it's going to keep going. And that's because that configuration item is only relevant for when you have an external foot switch connected up to it. So I basically have an FS5U that I connected up to it. When I push this, you'll notice it will go to 3 and then it will cycle back to 1. Now let's move to the next item. This is undo redo. It's saying when I've recorded something, do I want, and then I've overdubbed something on top of that. Do I want the long hold to undo what I've recorded immediately? Or do I want the long hold to undo what I've done after I've held it for 2 seconds and then released? So typically, this is the default on loopers. If I go record something, just something briefly. Now I'll overdub something. Now if I want to peel off what I overdubbed, I'll hold this down. You'll notice that it held it, that it removed it after I held this down for 2 seconds. Now, if I hold this down 2 seconds, it's going to bring it back. Let me show you what it does when I put this on the release. Now, if I push this down, before it would remove that overdub in 2 seconds, but now it keeps playing until I hold for 2 seconds and then whenever I release. So there you go. There, the overdub has been removed. Now if I want it back, same thing. I can hold this at 2 seconds. It's not going to bring it back. It's actually when I release. You can hear it there. Okay. All right, so there we are. That is the first section here, which is general. And then you have a control section. It lets you kind of specify how you want this foot switch to work when you push it down, long press it. And if you had external foot switches, you could assign them different functions as well. Okay, so this right here is saying when you press this foot switch once, it will start recording, and then if you push it again, it will play, and then if you push it twice, it will go ahead and stop, and then when it's stopped, if you push it again, it will clear it. So that's kind of the default that this is set to. There are some other ways that you can set this up. This one is basically saying you can do the record, the play, and the stop. All right, so if I wanted to record something now, the next thing is play. But if I wanted to clear it, holding this down for 2 seconds isn't going to clear it. So I basically disabled that clearing functionality from this foot switch. This again just makes it record and play and peels off the ability to be able to stop with this foot switch. Okay, that's where we started. Let's move forward. All right, this right here, the MOM stands for momentary. So this is only going to do the recording and the playing when you've depressed the foot switch. So currently we have something in there. So push the foot switch down, it's going to play, but as soon as I let go, it's going to stop playing. And that's going to be the same thing for recording on this. when I record, I push down, it's going to record, but it's only going to be momentary until I release, or when I release, it will stop the recording. Here, this is pretty self-explanatory. We have play and stop, and then the ability to clear with this pedal. This is stop, tap tempo, and then clear. This is kind of only beneficial when you have an external foot switch, because these don't make sense if you don't have the ability to trigger this to record from the to begin with. I'm just going to kind of fly through these a little bit. You can see them, and again, they're not really relevant unless you have another switch. When you go into the MIDI section, it kind of opens it up. If you have a MIDI pedal, you can have a lot of different buttons. You can assign the different channels of those buttons to do different functions. And I'm not going to go into that now, but just keep in mind that there's a lot of different things you can do with a MIDI pedal. Next item here, storage. Storage is when you're connected to a computer. When you're connected to a computer, you twist this knob, it'll change from off to and try to connect. The next item is factory reset. Factory reset is nice because it lets you do either memory, which would be one of those memory slots. Memories 1, it would clear out memories 1 through 99. It would, or you can set it to just clear the system settings. So there's various things that we went over, like the control of the foot switch or the general settings, like even the contrast, etc. You could set it back to factory, or if you want kind of the whole thing kind of refresh, you do both of those together. Okay, the last thing we have here is the memory. These are settings that you can store per a memory slot. There's 3. One is the configuration items specific to the memory that are related to loops. Next one is related to rhythm. And then you have the name, which is a little bit different, which is essentially if I wanted to change a memory slot's name from what the default is, memory 1 in this case, I could, by pushing this, twisting the knob, coming up with all the names, etc. And if you remember before, we can then set the display, instead of having it say 1 on it, there's one of the items that let you put the name of the memory slot instead of the number. Let's go back to this loop part. You can reverse the loop. One shot, let me set that to on. I've got something already recorded in this memory slot, which is memory slot 1. I'll hit play. It's only going to play it one time, then it will stop. Okay, so let's go into the next one. So this tells us when we're recording, and then we press the pedal once to stop the recording, what is it going to do next? We can have this set to go into overdubbing directly after we record, or we can have it go into playing directly after record. And that's typically what I have it set to. I think that's the default. All right, so let's go into the next one here. This is the dub mode. So basically when I'm overdubbing, is it going to replace the previous recorded track, or is it going to be layered on top of it? And essentially this is, overdub is layered on top, so I can continue to lay down tracks and I can hear all of them that I've recorded, each of the overdubs, or I can have it just replace the previous track. And if I don't have anything recorded, like right now, I can record something. So if I go into overdub, I'll press this down. You'll notice that it just peeled off what was before it. So the thing that was before it was actually the bass track. So if I switch it into replace after I've already laid down a few overdubs, it will replace the last overdub. But if I do it when there is nothing down and I record something, it will actually replace the original recording. All right, so let's move on to the next, which is auto record. And I really like this feature. This allows us to arm the looper by pushing down on the foot switch once, but when I do that, it's not going to start recording, it's just going to listen. You'll notice that there's no progress that's going on. So it's not going to start recording. You have to be careful not to touch, make a noise or it's going to start recording, but so you notice that it started recording when it heard something. So that is auto recording, and I like that a lot. This is when I trigger it to start. So if I wanted to, I've got something in there right now. If I want it to start playing immediately, I would leave it on this. When I push this foot switch down, it would start playing immediately. If I wanted to kind of have it fade in, I think also, yeah, that's the only other option. If I want it to fade in, I could. You can hear it kind of come up in volume. Okay. Same deal here. I don't need to demo this. It's basically when I'm stopping, is it just going to cut it off immediately, or is it going to fade out? Or in this mode here is going to actually just keep playing till the end of the loop. This lets you set the fade for either the start or the stop. When you have it set on fade, this will tell it how long that transition or the fade will occur. This defines the number of measures that your loop is set to. I've already recorded something and I did it for 2 measures, and so it recorded 2 measures there. But the way that it's currently set, you'll note, let me just clear what's currently there. Let's go back into here, go all the way to the end, and it says free. It said 2 a second ago, but then I erased the memory slot. All right, so this allows me to play, and then until I stop recording, the number of measures for the loop will not be determined. Now, here's something that's interesting, and I don't know if this is a bug. It doesn't say anything about these other options in the manual, but when I go to change this, I mean, it goes from 16th note, 8, it goes through these different things. And then if I go before those, auto, to me, auto is kind of the same thing as free, but in the manual, it doesn't talk anything about what this auto does, and it doesn't talk why these are here. In fact, it has these listed in a different section under the fade time, which is really interesting. I don't know what these are having to do with the measure, because the measure is really, you've got your time signature, you have the tempo, and then how many measures per loop. So I would expect it to be an integer. Sometimes these things are maybe not fully baked at the time. They do come up with firmware updates, and so I would recommend using those periodically to get the most recent changes that they've made. This is the rhythm things that I can change specific to a memory slot. These 2 items we went over before when we talked about kind of the global rhythm settings. Same as when we talked about the global rhythm settings. Looks like I've covered all of these. Okay, it looks like I covered all of those when I went over the rhythm section for the pedal and not a specific memory slot. All right, so I finished going over the different features of this pedal. Let me give you my 2 cents. I think this is a keeper. This is a great pedal. It has definitely more than just kind of incrementally improved over the RC3. I think the addition to the rhythm selections and kits and variation and the parts for the rhythm makes this definitely worth it. Also, I think this one's easier to configure. There were some kind of weird ways to configure things in the RC3 because you didn't have the LCD screen. So that's my 2 cents. I think it's a great pedal. And if you get an external foot switch for it, it will even make it better. If you do get one, I'd recommend getting a 2 switch. I think the FS6 and there's also the FS7. They have 2 switches on it. And the reason for that is because if you wanted to be able to traverse the memory settings, you could do that with the foot switch rather than having to turn the knob here, or you could set those to other functions. Hey, if you're into guitars and you love effects, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm constantly reviewing old and new pedals, and when I do, you'll be the first to know. Thanks for watching. Bye.